Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. Before I jump into the lecture video and talk about Hemingway, I have a couple of announcements, just a couple of changes that I want to go over to talk through. So, here are the announcements. First of all, I wanted to let you guys know, and I'll send this in the email as well. I have decided not to do the close reading assignment, and here's my justification. You guys are doing a lot more writing now than I ever expected you to do. And because you're writing at least 200 words or more because of your discussion posts, um, and in your response posts, 200 words, and then more when you do the discussion posts, I've just decided that you guys are doing enough writing and doing enough analysis of text that it's not necessary, and I think it would just kind of be almost too much to try to do the close reading assignment. We'll still have a final exam which you'll be doing at home and do some kind of at home writing with that as well, but there is not going to be a close reading assignment. I hope none of you are too sad about that. Okay. So with that said, I've decided now, starting with Fitzgerald, that response posts are worth 10 points. That means I can offer a little bit more nuance in the grades. I'll probably be doing some decimals, so I will be thinking about this kind of as, 9 through 10. 9.5 is 95. 8.7 is 87. So kind of trying to grade in that way. And then, but that also means, so we're not doing the kind of formal writing assignment. So I would like for you to work on polishing and organizing your response posts. What do I mean by that? I think when we post something in these discussion boards or when we post our response posts, they feel a little bit hurried to me. They feel a little bit like, here's all my ideas. I'm just going to write it down and post it. I want you to think about how are you organizing your ideas and what kind of focus are you creating. So I know I do kind of lots of different questions, but find a focus. Think about what you really want to claim in these and organize your writing around that. So if you have questions about what does it mean, and then polishing, what I mean by polishing is thinking about typos, thinking about word choice, etc. That also means we're not doing the close reading assignment, but I really want you to be conscious of using details, using words, phrases, and passages from the text. Okay, so I want you to support your claims with passages, with words, with phrases from the text. Show me that you are getting your ideas from the text itself. So pay attention to analysis, okay? And what do I mean by analysis? So I have some tips here for close reading and analysis. First of all, make sure you're addressing the questions. I've seen a couple of times where some people are going off in their own direction rather than sticking closely to what I'm asking. If you have an issue or question about the response post kind of guiding questions or the guide that I create for you, please let me know before you post. So make sure you're addressing the questions. And anytime you make some kind of claim, and what I mean by that, any kind of interpretation, any kind of venture into this is what the story is doing or what the story means, make sure you support it with evidence from the text. So what do I mean by evidence? The evidence is the words, the passages, the phrases that you think shows or supports what you're claiming. Okay? Make sure when you include textual evidence that you analyze the passage, word, or phrase. Don't just assume that me or other readers, right? Everybody in class could possibly be reading your response posts. I'm definitely reading them. Don't just assume that I read the passage in the same way you do. So just saying that this, like, making a claim and saying, like, and then quoting something as if that automatically supports what you're saying, that's not enough. You need to show how you're reading the text and how it supports your claim. So how do you do that? Well, I call this a quotation sandwich. So with a quotation sandwich, you always have to do an introduction. It can be something as simple as, like, this example here. Hemingway writes. Okay, so Hemingway writes. That's an introduction. That's all you need to do. You can do more if you want to. You can do a full sentence and put a colon and then move into a quote. Okay, so then you have the quote itself. So the introduction is the first slice of bread. Then the quote is like the meat of the sandwich, the filling of the sandwich. And then you have to do analysis or close reading. Okay, so what does that look like? Well, it could be pulling out words or phrases from that quote. So something like, by using the word elephant, Hemingway emphasizes ... So fill in the blanks there, right? Or even think about this phrase. This passage shows what? So what does it show? How are you reading it? And then because, and then give us that justification. Okay, so you can even think about kind of using this form to do your analysis after you quote something. Okay, so this last line is basically talking about the quotation sandwich. So introduce the passage, give us a quote, give us kind of words, phrases, whatever you're quoting here, and then close read after. Then once you do that, then you can make larger connections to the guiding questions, to your answer, or to the themes. So this whole kind of quotation sandwich thing, it can be really short. It doesn't have to be super long. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding how you see or read the text. Okay? So if you have questions about this, let me know. I'm going to move this down here again. So let's talk about Ernest Hemingway. Okay, I don't have a ton here. I basically have kind of one major thing to think about that is going to shape our understanding of this text. But let me start here. So what are some major concerns of Hemingway? So Hemingway, as the introduction to Hemingway says in the Norton Anthology, he was super famous. He won the Nobel Prize. By the time of his death, he was probably the most most famous living author. So he's really, really popular. But he, in some ways, has like almost, well, he has lots of themes, but one theme predominates his work, and that is this exploration of what I would call the spiritual or psychic malaise in the aftermath of World War I. So this kind of like, this major event happened and caused a lot of death, caused a lot of destruction. Now what do we do, right? How do we find meaning in a world torn apart? Sorry, it says turn apart, but it should say torn apart. So how do we find meaning in a world torn apart? And exploring those various ways that people seek meaning. I think you can see in Hills Like White Elephants some of those ways that people are seeking meaning or finding a way to live in the aftermath of World War I are maybe more destructive or less helpful or meaningful ways of living. I think he's exploring those things, but so this kind of major theme of this malaise. So what do I mean by malaise? This kind of lostness. There's a theme, or there's a name for the generation of those young people who survived World War I. That is the lost generation. So kind of looking at what is this experience of loss and of being lost. And he explores that in his writing, his novels, and in short stories. Okay, so the major thing to think about with Hemingway, and something that's so distinctive about him, is his style. So when I was talking about modernist prose, we talked about the kind of innovations and experimentations that these writers were partaking in or exploring. So what is Hemingway's kind of innovation in prose? Well, compared to somebody like, I mean, just think about Fitzgerald. Think about the lushness, the use of figurative language, the kind of fullness of the narrative voice in something like Winter's Dreams. Compare that to Hemingway. So Hemingway is much more interested in kind of stripping away, taking away, making things simpler, seemingly straightforward, seemingly and deceptively simple. There's a kind of minimalist quality to his prose in a way that we do not see in a lot of other modernist writers, Fitzgerald, Faulkner, Joyce, Woolf. The major modernist writers are kind of have the characteristic of having a lot, right? There's a lot of narrative voice. There's kind of pushing the boundaries. So he is instead kind of pulling back, kind of moving and stripping away. So his style is straightforward, telegraphic, meaning it kind of almost choppy, um, deceptively simple. And why do I put deceptively? Because there's a lot going on underneath the surface, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So people could call it minimalist, stripped down. And he often has a focus on dialogue and external description. There's something about Hills Like White Elephants that feels almost like a play, right? There's something like so much dialogue that it's like there's no internal description. Everything is external. Everything is externalized. Okay? So, one thing, and this has kind of become the predominant way of understanding Hemingway and his style and his themes. And something that's interesting is the kind of the themes of his work really connect to his style, to that stripping away. And I'll talk more about that in a second. But he has something called the iceberg theory. So he talks about his style as kind of functioning like an iceberg, which means there's a part that you can see, right? So you can see here on the screen the kind of what you see in an iceberg, and then how much more of an iceberg is underneath the surface. And so he really gives us only the things that are above the surface of the water, surface of the individual psyche, of somebody's inner life, right? We only see what is external. What is that? Words, tonality. So we can see like a tonality of, we can kind of hear a tone in the words, in the dialogue, but we don't necessarily understand the motivations, or we aren't given the motivations for that tone. Also body language, right? How does somebody move? So these external things and gestures, we might see a little bit of that in in Hills Like White Elephants. I think of that specific moment where the woman reaches out and touches the beads. That's a really kind of weighted moment, right? She's touching the beads, but it doesn't tell us what that action means, but we see that action. We can infer something from that action. Okay, so we see these external things, but then there's things happening. There's always kind of ideas, thoughts, motivations underneath the surface. So beliefs, values, biases, prejudices, experiences, fears, dreams, feelings, emotions, all of the things that somebody like a Fitzgerald would tell us through the narrative voice, Hemingway takes away, right? We don't have any kind of sense of, we don't have the narrative voice telling us what the characters feel, right? We can kind of gain a sense, we can kind of gain an understanding of what these characters feel, but we aren't told how they're feeling, if that makes sense. Okay, So how does this style connect to themes? So just thinking about Hills Like White Elephants a little bit. Um, there is something underlying, there's a dramatic tension, there's a dramatic kind of conflict or event that is underneath the surface of this entire story. If this is the first time you've read it, it's probably going to be difficult maybe for you to fully grasp what's happening. So let me tell you what's going on. We know that the American man, he mentions an operation. Well, what operation is he talking about? He's talking about abortion. So these characters are what is underneath the surface, the kind of dramatic tension that is lying under beneath the seemingly simple dialogue. Is this decision of the woman and the man, is this, first of all, this pregnancy that is clearly unexpected, and then the decision whether to keep the baby. So I think this is a really interesting story. Obviously, abortion is a really difficult subject. Um, it's something that's difficult to talk about, and it's often framed as an ideological argument. One thing I like about this story is that it doesn't give us any kind of ideological argument. It looks at the kind of the experience of the woman and the man and this pregnancy and this decision. It's very much kind of an exploration of, um, like I said, it's not ideological, but it's more this feeling or exploration of the experience of this choice. Um, so yeah, if I were in class, I would say, like, let's not move into the ideological. I'd say let's not push into the ideological. Let's try to consider how this decision is making these characters feel. That's what's underneath the surface. This kind of really tumultuous feelings that around this decision. Okay? So how does that, so again, um, so thinking about how style and theme connect, this idea of something kind of happening under the surface and we never really see it, but it's always shaping everything the characters do and say. Okay, so think about that. And this helps us move to the next major theme here, which is talking versus communication. So we see the characters talking a lot, but they aren't really communicating something. They're not communicating their feelings. There's maybe like once or twice. I think of the kind of the moment of the woman when she says, "Please, please, 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 please stop talking." The actual like the kind of silence that she asks for is communicating something much more than anything she's said before. So this idea of we can say a lot of things, but that doesn't mean we're actually expressing or communicating what we're feeling or what is beneath the surface. Okay? So a couple of other things and a couple of other entry points to this text, and I think this will help us think about the response posts. Um, so the setting, so we're in a train station. Okay, what does that do or what does that mean for the characters? They're sitting in a train station, waiting to go somewhere else, and it's kind of a place where it's kind of a nowhere place, but they're waiting and they're trying to figure out this or make this major decision. So there's a kind of crossroads. So think about that. And then the landscape. So the story is called Hills Like White Elephants. We see the woman kind of looking at the landscape multiple times. Think about the different parts of the landscape. We have the hills and the elephants. We have kind of the river, but also this kind of barren brown land. What does that dichotomy suggest? And then we can always kind of read this story through the characters and their dialogue. So what is the dialogue trying to suggest or say? Um, and what's underneath the surface? So how can we kind of pierce the surface of the characters' dialogue and words and phrases and think about what are they really feeling? Also, there's interesting questions around gender. So, what does it say about the way the man communicates, about how he understands gender and how he communicates to the woman? These kind of issues. Also, I didn't put it on here, but another thing to think about is alcohol, right? These people are drinking, are talking about alcohol. It becomes this kind of major part of the story. What's the significance there? Okay. All right. So that's all I have. I think we did good. We have a shorter, in true Hemingway style, a shorter video here. So let me know if you have questions about this story. I think it is one of those stories that's really easy to read, but very kind of deceptively, yeah, deceptively complex. And I want you to, and maybe if you, I mean, it's literally 4 pages or less, 3.5 pages. Um, if you've read it and you just kind of was like, and you kind of felt like, this doesn't really do anything or like doesn't really speak to me much, read it again, thinking about Hemingway's kind of iceberg theory and how that might reshape your understanding of the story. Okay? All right, so this is Thursday's class. We're doing good. You guys are doing great. Really think about kind of polishing your response posts and organizing those and really creating a focus. And then make sure you're considering how you're using the text and how you're supporting your ideas. Okay? All right. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope you're safe and comfortable. Okay? Talk to you soon. Bye.